Welcome to SF Climate Week. I'm sure some of you have been attending many of the events. We're glad you joined us for this one. Um, we are the presentation on how nature is vital to the climate fight. And next screen. We're going to begin by going over the agenda, what you're going to learn about at this webinar today. We're basically answering the question, why should climate activists and people who care about the climate also care about protecting nature? Nature and the environment are sometimes seen as different issues than climate issues. They're related, but sometimes separated. We're going to be showing you why they're vitally interconnected and we need to care about nature. So in part one, Alice Kaufman will talk about how protecting habitat protects the climate. And we'll also talk about how protecting open space and development helps to fight climate change. And then we'll hear from Andy Shrader of Climate Action California, why biodiversity is essential to a stable climate. He'll talk about why we need to manage water and that affects the climate, and how the way we grow food affects the climate. Throughout their presentation, if you could please submit questions using the Q&A feature, then we'll ask some of those questions at the end as time allows. There's a tip: if you can't see the Q&A, you can log out and go to your browser, zoom.us, and log in that way, and you should be able to see the QA at the bottom. You may have to click more. All right, so next screen. I'm going to begin by introducing Climate Action California. To those who don't know our organization, we are a volunteer-run nonprofit with over 11,000 members, 7,000 of whom live here in California. And our volunteers work together to advance science-based climate policies through local, state, and federal climate legislation and regulation. One of our secret sauces is that we train our volunteers in the intricacies of how the legislative and regulatory processes work. They learn how to go behind the scenes, how power is shared, how decisions are influenced, and how they can help to get climate policies through the gauntlet or stop bad policies from getting through. So you can see from the photo, we do a lot of our meetings on Zoom since we're a statewide, even national organization. We don't have a physical office. We're spread throughout the state. But we do have a capital team based in Sacramento, and those volunteers can go in and meet with legislators and give comments at public or at the committee hearings. So they're an important part of what we do. All right, let's go on to the next screen. I'm going to pass it or introduce the two speakers and then pass it to Alice. So today you'll hear from Andy Shrader, who's the co-lead of the Natural Resources team at Climate Action California. He's also the senior advisor for People, Food, and Land Foundation. We also have Alice Kaufman, who's the policy ambassador for Green Foothills. And myself, I forgot to say, I'm Linda Hutchins-Knowles. I'm the volunteer coordinator at Climate Action California. And we'll go ahead and have Alice do the first presentation. Take it away, Alice.
Great. Thank you so much, Linda. Thanks for the invitation to be here, and thanks to everybody for joining. So as Linda said, my name is Alice Kaufman, and I am the Policy and Advocacy Director for Green Foothills. So just a little bit about Green Foothills, if you're not familiar with us. Our mission is to protect nature and farmland to ensure a healthy environment for everyone. And we do this through advocacy, education, and grassroots action focused on the counties of San Mateo, Santa Clara, and San Benito. And we've been around since 1962, and we're very proud of the fact that more than 200,000 acres have been permanently protected as a result of our advocacy. We engage in local land use issues, we provide policy expertise to government decision makers, and we mobilize community to raise their voices in support of protecting our region's natural environment. So as Linda said, we are here today to answer this burning question, which is, why should climate activists care about protecting nature? So our planet is in the midst of twin crises, the climate crisis and the biodiversity crisis. And those of you who have read Elizabeth Kolbert's book, The Sixth Extinction, I can never say that, you know that our biodiversity on this planet is crashing in a way that has not happened since the asteroid that wiped out the dinosaurs. But what you may not know is that when we lose nature and biodiversity, we are losing a powerful tool to address climate change and reduce emissions. So next slide, please. So what are the climate benefits of protecting and stewarding open space and nature? I'm just going to go over this really briefly because I know Andy is going to cover it in a lot more detail. But basically, as first of all, natural lands are carbon sinks. Wetlands, forest, grassland, farmland soils They all sequester carbon from the atmosphere. I've seen varying statistics for how much carbon forests absorb, but it is in the billions of metric tons per year. And wetlands are a superpower for carbon sequestration. I have seen statistics saying that even though wetlands cover only 3% of the world's land, they actually store twice as much carbon as all of the forests on the planet. So that is huge. So it's really, really important for us to protect our wetlands. And then grassland. People don't usually think of grass as something that absorbs a lot of carbon, but native grasses, which have deep root systems, store an immense amount of carbon below the soil. Just as an example, there's a California native bunch grass called purple fescue that can have roots up to 20 feet deep. And unfortunately, California native grasses are usually outcompeted by invasive grasses. So one of the things that we can do to save the planet and address climate change is to prevent invasive plants from taking over. Next slide, please. So in general, the more biodiverse an ecosystem is, the more effective it's going to be at sequestering carbon. So stewarding the landscape, restoring ecosystem balance, promoting native species and controlling invasives, and in some cases, recreating historical ecology is also a way to fight climate change. And you'll notice that I've included an image of a controlled burn here. That is because applying fire to the landscape is also part of land stewardship. Indigenous tribes stewarded California's landscape for thousands of years until they were forcibly removed from the land. And the reason that we have such terrible wildfires now is because of the built-up fuel loads in the forests. When the land was being burned regularly by tribes, fires were not as devastating as they are now, and they didn't burn as hot. So it was the landscape recovered faster. And native California trees evolved with fire. They are fire adapted, and in many cases are actually fire dependent. So reintroducing fire to the landscape is also part of addressing climate change. Next slide, please. So why should we protect open space from development? 3 words: vehicle miles traveled. Next slide, please. Yeah, there we go. Putting new homes on open space outside of cities inevitably results in people driving everywhere they go, which obviously increases greenhouse gases. Next slide. So this is a map from the city of San Jose. So San Jose has embodied this whole concept of VMT, vehicle miles traveled, and how sprawl development increases VMT. So this map is what they call it their VMT per capita map. They have another one which is VMT per jobs. This one shows you where we should be focusing our residential growth. The green areas, obviously, that's the downtown. That's where people aren't going to have to drive great distances to get to work, school, important services, retail, and so on. And then we go from yellow to orange to red as we go further out. And the red areas are what's called immitigable VMT areas, meaning there's just no way to fully mitigate for the climate impact of developing in these areas. Like you can have what's called TDM programs, stands for Transportation Demand Management. That can include things like vouchers for public transit, shuttles, bike facilities, bike storage facilities, and so on. But none of that is going to get rid of the greenhouse gas impact if we build out in these sprawl areas. Next slide, please. So here's an example of sprawl development. This is from San Jose, it's part of San Jose is what I mean. You can see, this is basically jutting out into the hillsides. It's just on the very edge of the developed area. And you could probably tell just by looking at this photo, these people are going to be driving everywhere they go, right? There's no public transit, there's no stores close by or anything else that people can walk to. They can, if they're comfortable on a bike, they can hop on a bike and go a few miles, but that's just not going to be true of everybody for them to be able to do that. And that's why we say that sprawl development is car dependent development. And I do want to take a moment to emphasize that I'm not holding this neighborhood up as being evil in any way. I'm not blaming the people who live in these homes for living there. The point that I'm trying to make is that decisions are being made about where people are going to live long before anybody actually buys a house, right? If sprawl development is what gets built, then that's where people are going to live, right? That's just obvious. Land use planning basically makes our housing choices for us. So that's why it's critical that we pay attention to how our communities are growing and not just leave it up to chance. Okay, next slide. And also another thing that people just don't realize is that sprawl development is expensive. It's much more expensive than infill development. Cities bear the burden of providing urban services to their residents. So ultimately, that means taxpayers. So police and fire protection, water and sewer services, road maintenance, trash collection, libraries, parks, all of those things are a lot more expensive to provide to low density sprawl development than to provide to dense infill housing. Just the geographic, uh, literally the amount of linear miles that have to be traveled, whether through police and fire officials having to go farther, or just those extra miles of sewer pipes and water pipes and so on. And then also, again, we're talking about fire. There's just greater risk of wildfires to homes that are built out on the edge of open space. And that's a double whammy because it raises the cost of protecting people's homes, but also it actually increases the risk that wildfires will happen because the great majority of wildfires are caused by human activity. So you put more people out in a fire-prone area, you have greater risk of fires. Next slide. All right, what can we do? What can we do to protect open space and enhance it and do everything else that I was just talking about? Next slide. Few simple actions, and again, I know Andy's going to have some more recommendations, but you can use the power of the ballot. You can vote. I can tell you about one ballot measure that's going to be on the June primary ballot in Santa Clara County, in part of Santa Clara County, I should say, which is going to generate $17 million a year to protect and restore open space. It's going to be providing funding to the Santa Clara Valley Open Space Authority. And this is going to be a really big boon for not just for protecting open space, but for stewarding it, like I said before, which is like a really important part of addressing climate change and increasing biodiversity. You can also support organizations that do this work. Obviously, my organization, Green Foothills, I'm always happy to put in a plug for us. But in addition, there's a lot of other organizations. If you live in our area in the peninsula and the South Bay, there's Post Peninsula Open Space Trust. There's groups like Grassroots Ecology that do native restoration. I couldn't possibly name all of them. Those are just a few, but I definitely would encourage you to learn about all these organizations and support them. And if you really want to take action when the time comes, because we are an advocacy organization, we're not out there on the land, we're not purchasing land or planting native plants or removing invasives, but we are connecting our community to opportunities to take action and let their voices be heard. So when there's an important vote that will affect open space in some way that's coming up, if you are signed up for our email alerts, you will get an email telling you, just providing you, frankly, with a form to make it really easy. All you have to do is put in your email address and click send. You can also put in your own personalized message if you don't feel like you have the time or you don't want to spend the time to do that. We always have a template that you can use. So if you go to greenfoothills.org, subscribe. You just go to greenfoothills.org. It's our website, and you can find the link to subscribe to our newsletter from there. There we go. I think I got through all my material, and I am going to hand it over to Andy now.
Thank you, Alice, and thank you to Climate Action California for hosting this today. So I work as the co-lead of the Natural Resources Committee for Climate Action California, where, as Linda mentioned, we work to support good state policy, fight against bad policy, and work to educate folks on why nature is essential in the climate fight, because it is. Under another hat, I work with People, Food, and Land Foundation on campaigns and state legislation to support the deployment of compost from cities where food waste is created to agricultural areas where they need it for the creation of healthy soils and widespread carbon sequestration. Since humans are the only creatures on Earth that do not actively give back to nature, we're working hard to change that. I want to take a complementary path to what Alice has laid out so well and talk a little more about the importance of protecting biodiversity and why that's a climate issue, about the management of water and why that's a climate issue, and lastly, about the management of food and agriculture and how that might actually be one of our most important climate issues. So, to frame how I look at the world, one of the things I think that the climate movement on the whole tends to overlook is the magic of the natural world. So when scientists are studying this aspect or that aspect of climate, there's always something missing that they don't fully understand or consider. We know the planet's getting hotter much faster than anybody anticipated, but if we give it just a chance, if we give nature some breathing room, something really miraculous can happen and is happening. And we're just starting to really understand why that is and what we can do about it. Next slide, please. So for one great example, let's take a look at California's marine protected areas. This was taken in a protected area in the Channel Islands. What marine protected areas do is halt or restrict commercial fishing and certain recreational activities in the areas we want to protect. And they're working really remarkably. Monitoring is showing in a relatively short amount of time, more and bigger fish and invertebrates begin thriving within these protected areas. A higher abundance of species like lobsters show up in nearby surrounding unprotected waters. And most importantly, for today's conversation, marine protected areas significantly help with carbon sequestration by protecting so-called blue carbon ecosystems such as mangroves and seagrass meadows and salt marshes, all of which absorb and store large amounts of atmospheric CO2. So next slide, please. California's Marine Protected Area Network, which includes 124 areas off our coast, is recognized as an international gold standard for conservation, which basically means what we do in California doesn't stay in California. It echoes. Next slide, please. On land, healthy wildlife can help keep the natural cycles, the carbon cycle, intact and in balance. This interaction means rewilding can be among the best nature-based climate solutions available. So let's get to the beaver. That's one of our best examples. There's been a lot of talk about beavers in the last few years, and the new Pixar film Hoppers is a little bit about that too. Beavers act as ecosystem engineers, where if you leave them alone and keep them healthy, they'll put up dams which hold water. The water from the dam helps replenish the nearby groundwater, which keeps the surrounding ecosystem healthy, which means you grow more healthy plants, which sequester carbon dioxide, and the resulting healthy damp soil helps prevent wildfires. So the benefits are sort of like the opposite of a domino. It sets everything up the way that it should be. And wildlife corridors, which you've probably heard a lot about in California, especially recently, which we've been talking about and working on for over a decade now, operate in a similar way. Next slide, please. So California is situated in the midst of what's called the California Floristic Province, which is one of the world's 36 biodiversity hotspots, which means that we have plants and animals that can't be found anywhere else and that they're threatened by human activity. So we in California have been taking that on as as an important responsibility. And one of the big inspirations for that, next slide, is this guy, P22. The week I started working for LA City Council member Paul Koretz back in 2012, this guy showed up and really surprised us all. An apex predator took up residence in the largest park in the middle of the second largest city in the entire country. And it took no time at all for Angelinos to love him. Politically, protecting P22 and his fellow creatures became super popular, which gave us lots of cover to get a lot of things accomplished. Next slide, please. We realized we needed an umbrella effort under which everything else would make sense. So working with a UCLA professor named Travis Longcore and some other folks, we wrote legislation and launched our effort, which resulted in the creation of the LA City Biodiversity Index, which counts and accounts for the plants and animals and insects in Los Angeles. Next slide. B-22 also inspired the building of the most ambitious wildlife crossing I've ever heard about, crossing 6 lanes of the 101 freeway between Agora Hills and Calabasas, just north of Los Angeles. The ribbon cutting was just announced actually this week for December, so be there. But why do we care about protecting apex predators for climate and protecting wildlife habitat connectivity? Similar to the beavers, apex predators do their jobs in keeping ecosystems thriving. They really give back to the ecosystems because they kill huge animals, deer, sometimes smaller animals like coyotes and raccoons. But what a good, healthy mountain lion will do is bury the carcass so it can come back and feed from it. But often they forget about the carcass, but the carcass ends up nourishing the soil. And when you nourish the soil, you get all these ecosystem benefits I'm talking about, nutrient content, plant growth, uh, water retention. So we really care about apex predators for that reason. Next slide. Meanwhile, at the state level, because of all the fuss and about P22 and other reasons, Governor Newsom launched his 30 by 30 biodiversity protection campaign, which has been remarkably successful in funding a lot of this work. Next slide. And in LA, we launched an effort to really support the wildlife bridge. If we're connecting across the freeway, we want to make sure that we connect all of our various natural areas that are already protected. Next slide, please. So we launched a plan, which I'm pleased to say the State Wildlife Conservation Board is funding to do the science and policy and actively connect all of these areas for a regional wildlife habitat connectivity project. Next slide, please. And this is why. There's a big study which supports all of this from Florida, of all places, about the Florida Wildlife Corridor, which is the only statewide corridor in the entire United States. Science is really showing that substantial climate resilient benefits from the corridor are showing a much higher return on investment than they thought. It's providing billions with a B of dollars of flood hazard protection in addition to carbon mitigation. So for our purposes in California, wildlife corridors will help us to mitigate wildfires and provide migration routes for animals and plants to move around as the climate continues to change. Next slide, please. So here's another fun fact for you. The United States is one of the only countries in the world that is not a signatory, that's not a signatory to the United Nations Biodiversity Treaty. But fear not, California to the rescue. My natural resources co-chair, Wendy Sue Rosen, has been more involved in this than I have. But California has an internationally focused working group called the California Global Biodiversity Alliance that essentially takes the great work we're doing in California to the international biodiversity conferences around the world, swaps best practices, and actually gets involved in the negotiations for an international biodiversity treaty and has actually moved the needle. So what we do in California doesn't stay in California. It echoes. Next slide. So I don't want to spend a whole lot of time on water, mainly because I could spend a whole lot of time on water. Next slide. But effective water management is enormously significant for climate change. It reduces water's natural role in temperature regulation and carbon cycling, reduces energy use in water systems. Healthy water systems absorb CO2, while efficient water use cuts emissions from energy-intensive transport and treatment, and we'll see why this is important. Next slide, please. So if you want to design a system by which to create a sustainable and reliable water system for more than 40 million people as we head into a climate changed world, what you wouldn't do is what we've done. And and we're doing the best we can with what we've got. We move enormous amounts of water long distances to places where there really isn't enough local water to support enormous populations, like all of Southern California and Arizona. The California State Water Project supplies water to almost 27 million Californians and 750,000 acres of farmland. It spans more than 750 miles from Northern California to Southern California and includes 36 storage facilities, 21 pumping plants, five hydroelectric power plants, four pumping generating stations, and approximately 700 miles of canals, tunnels, and pipelines. And don't get me started on the Colorado River because that's another hour and a half. So the State Water Project is the largest single user of electricity in California, the largest single user of electricity, consuming between 6 million and 9.5 million megawatt hours annually. That's an enormous amount of electricity. And we've been working hard to get it from renewable energy sources, but the bottom line is that conserving water really reduces greenhouse gas emissions. And you'll hear from people complaining about agriculture using so much water, but the problem isn't really agriculture, it's all those people who want to eat. So I'll let you sit with that for a minute. So when you hear people talking about desalination plants, I want you to think about all the energy that takes and the greenhouse gas emissions involved. When you hear people talk about building massive tunnels, I want you to consider that they're saying they want to build the tunnels to move water in years where we have reduced snowpack. But then I want you to think about what water they think they will be moving because without snowpack, we have no actual water to move, which is why we're focused on local water solutions and the large-scale creation of healthy soils from compost, which is what I want to talk about next. Next slide. So human beings are the one creature on Earth that doesn't actually give back to the planet as part of its life cycle. And we could and we can if we manage our food correctly. So when we manage our food badly, which is what we've been doing forever, it goes to the landfill and creates a massive methane problem. Next slide. Methane is a huge super pollutant. It's responsible for about 30% of global warming since the Industrial Revolution, has a half-life of about 12 years in the atmosphere, and has a global warming effect of about 26 to 28 times that of CO2 over 100 years, and about 84 to 87 times that over 20 years. So if we can reduce methane in the short term, which I think is one of our biggest necessities, we can get it out of the atmosphere quicker than CO2. And one of the best ways to do that is to use our food waste, One way is to reduce the food waste on the plate and reduce food waste that's going sent to landfill. Next slide. And the best way to reduce the food waste that's getting sent to landfill is to turn it into compost. And there's a whole bunch of science, which we'll get to in a bit, showing that compost on managed rangelands and on agricultural lands is really creating healthy soils in a great way that's sequestering carbon dioxide. And if we do it on a large scale, scientists are starting to believe that we could actually cool the planet. Next slide. So creating more of that magic that science is starting to look into, we can be creating a regenerative and what we're calling a restorative cycle, which is one of California's priorities. Next slide. There's a bill called SB 1383 from 2016 that is California's short-lived climate pollutant strategy, which mandates that all municipalities divert organic waste from landfills where it produces methane to composting facilities, which provide the fuel for our global cooling strategy. And this is supported by a decade and a half of research from a UC Berkeley scientist named Wendy Silver, showing that one single layer of compost starts this reinforcing cycle of carbon capture, increased plant productivity. It extends the growing season and is actually really good at retaining water. So she's done all these pilots, uh, which has really informed the state's Healthy Soils program. Um, and so we've been working with Point Blue, which is a Sonoma County, Marin County organization, to do a bigger scale pilot to see how this is working and make sure that the science is working. And we have a NASA scientist named Chris Potter who has created something called the Commons Planner. And what the Commons Planner is doing is mapping out the correct type of soil to put compost on for maximum sequestration and maximum water retention. Because if you put it in the wrong place, if you put it on like hard, hard soil, compacted soil, it's just going to blow away. So Chris Potter's technology is identifying the exact right place to put compost, and he's been mapping out not only Sonoma and Marin County, but other places in California. He's been mapping out Mongolia, Kenya, Ukraine, Denmark, uh, Argentina, because if we get this pilot right, then the goal is to really spread it quickly to these other areas with managed rangelands. And there's a desertification conference of parties in Mongolia in August, which we're looking at to present this and see if we can really start to scale it. It's really exciting. It's got massive carbon sequestration benefits and can really help cool the planet if we do it right. So, uh, so with People, Food, and Land, last year we supported and initiated a bill called SB 279, which helps farmers and ranchers and community composters do composting with fewer permitting issues. Um, we've got a bill going this year, which is called AB 2112, which is resetting the state's goals to resetting the state's goals to uh, ensure that we have big composting goals. Um, let's see, next slide, please. Oh, and I wanted to cover this too. There's two big problems with compost. One is if you let plastic get into your food container, there's a whole bunch of contamination issues with compost. So it's really important to pay attention to what you're throwing in there. But the other problem is getting compost from the cities where the food waste is created out to the agricultural areas where it can be used. So there's an organization called Zero Foodprint who's trying to figure out how to fund that work, and they help farmers and ranchers actually make that transition. Uh, and if they do that, they can actually reduce fertilizer use, which comes from fossil fuels. And if you've been paying attention to the war right now, fertilizer is a giant big deal because the Straits of Hormuz uh, moves through a giant amount of fertilizer each year. And if we can replace that with compost, we're reducing that problem as well. Next slide. So what can we do? Next slide. You knew this was coming. Get your hands dirty. Get involved. Next slide, please. Support compost. Throw your food waste in the right container. Uh, as you know, we're in the middle of a big gubernatorial campaign. So push for the next governor to vigorously support compost, to vigorously support the 30 by 30 biodiversity initiative that Governor Newsom launched and the state legislature is supporting. Support the Bring Back the Beaver and Wildlife Corridor campaigns and marine protected areas. Protect CEQA at all costs, which is what Alice was really talking about. And we can do affordability and protect nature. It's really important. And also support local water solutions. And the way to do that is join Climate Action California. Next slide, please. Get involved with People, Food, and Land. This is our website. You can check out what else we're doing. Next slide. And I think Linda is going to wrap us up with telling you how to get involved with Climate Action California, which is a really effective organization, lots of smart people, and we're doing really good work. Thanks so much.
Yeah, thank you, Andy and Alice, for terrific presentations. We're going to move to Q&A in just a minute, but I did want to say we are almost entirely volunteer run at Climate Action California. We have less than three full-time staff to support the 11,000 volunteers. And we need volunteers. So if you scan that code, and I'll put the link in the Q&A, you can I get an email basically when you fill out that form, and then I can reach out to you and we could set up a meeting so I can learn about your interests and your skills, your passions, tell you about the different teams we have. I didn't mention in the beginning, we also have an elections team because we don't just have an educational nonprofit, we have a political advocacy nonprofit and a political action committee that endorses climate champions that are running for the state legislature, for the governor's race, and we could use more volunteers helping us to vet the candidates and then to help them get elected. So please sign up to volunteer, and I'll help you find a great way to do it. We really are fun and community oriented, really smart and dedicated volunteers. I've worked at several climate groups, and I have to say I'm blown away with the quality and the dedication of the volunteers at Climate Action California. It's truly remarkable. And also, if a lot of you already volunteer for other organizations or work for them and don't have the bandwidth to volunteer more time, I get that. If you want to make a contribution to support our work, we also welcome that. We have a very small, limited budget. We don't take foundation grants, so we are completely independent, don't have to worry about that, but we do rely on supporters to support our work. So thank you. And with that, we are going to move to the Q&A now, and I'm excited to see many good questions coming in. And I'm checking on the time. Yeah, we have about 15 minutes to get through, hopefully, most of these, probably not all. And I wanted to start with one that came up about the Delta Conveyance Project. Andy, you were talking about managing water, and if you'd like to share any thoughts about that, she's wondering, it moves, it's looking like it's just on this path to go get constructed, but how will it disrupt local habitats and groundwater levels? And what are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, as I mentioned, and I think I touched on it, moving water long distances is not really the most effective way to provide water for uh, for people to drink in large population centers. Um, One of the arguments for building the which we used to call the Bay Delta BDCP, which was the Bay Delta Conservation Project. We call it the BD No CP uh, because there was no conservation actually back when I was working on this. Um, when there's no water because of snowpack, like we've had a really bad snow year this year, and they say, oh, we need to build all these big tunnels so we can move more water in low water years. There's actually no snowpack to melt to move the water, so there's no water to move. It's just kind of a basic logic problem. Um, and so one of the reasons we've been working on really large scale local projects like recycled water and that sort of thing is because that's the most cost-effective way to provide a resilient water future for more people. And if we can get more people to capture water and use that on their landscapes, landscape is still a huge water use. If people can, we had a big thing about tearing out your lawns, replace it with native plants. That's the most effective way to have beautiful landscape that doesn't use a bunch of water. Um, but these big infrastructure projects just create a bigger problem with that we don't need to create with a lot of money that we could use elsewhere.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And then we also had a question about how people can defend CEQA from further cuts and rollbacks. I wonder, Alice, if you want to address that one?
Oh, sure. Um, I mean, I guess maybe first I should say a little bit about what CEQA is. Maybe not everybody is familiar with the acronym. It stands for the California Environmental Quality Act. It's considered our state's premier environmental law, and it requires that projects that are going to have a significant or that could have a significant environmental impact have to have those impacts analyzed and mitigated to the extent possible. It also mandates public participation and transparency. So it's about that kind of good governance, like making sure that people have a chance to even find out what these projects are that are going to happen. And when I say projects, I'm talking about, anything that has some kind of impact on the world or on our communities. So highways, on big developments, dams, all of these different kinds of things. Um, in California, we're required to analyze those impacts and mitigate them to the extent possible. And so the question was asking, what can we do to defend against the attacks on this? Um, yeah, there is what I will tell you, the evidence is showing is like a big misconception that CEQA is somehow what is stopping us from getting things built. There's this narrative out there that is saying that CEQA is the problem. And if you look at the statistics, you will see that CEQA does, it is almost never an issue in the vast majority of projects that go through the process. They get approved, there's no problem. Yes, sometimes you have controversial projects that make the headlines, and that can make for some very bad publicity. But what those headlines don't show is, and I will also say, not just the vast amount of projects that go through with no problem, but also the really bad projects that deserve to have this a little bit more attention paid to the impacts they're going to have, and to have improvements made to them that reduce those environmental impacts. If you don't have CEQA, you don't have any way to require those impacts. So there you go. That's what I have to say about CEQA. And yes, there are attacks on CEQA. They're happening right now. The one that is, we see bills in the legislature every year. Everybody's trying to get, we're trying to get that environmental review requirement reduced for whatever their own, industry is, or their own pet project. And I do want to talk about, because I want to bring this back to what you can do. There is an effort going on right now from the California Chamber of Commerce to have a proposition on the statewide ballot in November. And it would basically rewrite our environmental laws. It would basically rewrite CEQA for a huge category of projects, which includes some really environmentally damaging projects. Things like new freeways and widening of freeways and interchanges and all sorts of other things like that. New dams and other water infrastructure. I talked a lot about how sprawl development's a problem. It would weaken CEQA for new residential sprawl projects. And that's actually like particularly ironic because there's a lot of people who are saying, oh, well, CEQA is the reason why we're not, being able to build new housing. But just last year, there was a bill passed that totally exempted infill housing, in cities where we need to have it, from CEQA. So CEQA is not going to stop any more of those infill projects. So the only thing that this ballot measure would streamline, would fast track, is sprawl projects. So they're going to talk a lot about housing and how this would help housing. What they mean by that is sprawl. So, and I'm also going to say that there are also some energy projects that are in this category of projects that would be weakened, and they're obviously trying to get clean energy supporters to vote for this by including those. And as for that, all I will say is, we should not vote for something that makes it easier to build energy transmission lines if it also makes it easier to expand freeways and do other things that are damaging for the climate. So, yeah. And also, I'll just say it's being funded by big corporations that would benefit financially from having our environmental laws weakened. The parent company of Southern California Edison is a major funder. The Building Industry Association, which is basically in the business of enabling sprawl development, they're a major funder, so follow the money. And sorry, you got me started here. Honestly, what I think is just, speaking as somebody who does this work as an advocate, I think one of the worst things about this initiative is that it would require a 2/3 majority of the legislature to make any changes and or to pass any bill that could possibly hamper these projects that this measure is trying to get done. And even though we have a supermajority of Democrats in the legislature, it's still really hard to get a 2/3 majority for anything. So basically, people could vote for this saying, "Oh wow, it sounds good," but not realizing that they're creating something that we can never get rid of, no matter how destructive it turns out to be. So vote no on this initiative. It doesn't have a proposition number yet. We're not close enough to the election. They're gathering signatures with some innocuous name like it's an initiative that makes tiny little changes to environmental law. Don't be fooled. It's a big, bad, deceptive, environmentally destructive initiative. Vote no.
Thank you, Alice. That made me think of Big Bad Ballot Initiative, like the big bad bill. So yeah, thank you. That was very compelling. Thank you for sharing all the ways people can do that. And I also want to mention that Climate Action California's natural resources team that Andy's the co-lead of, the team members there are very much working on this issue and raising awareness about the ballot initiative and wanting to make sure that that doesn't pass. So if you want to get involved more than just your individual action of voting no on this, that's another way you could volunteer, get involved. So let's take another question. And maybe this one could just be it's like a factual question, Andy, just a short one, but does composting produce greenhouse gases itself? The question is, and maybe you could address
It
that.
if you do it correctly, and it's a good question, um, food waste just kind of sitting there is going to create greenhouse gases wherever you pile it up. Um, but if you do it correctly, then compost. And there's one of the reasons that the Air Board actually regulates and permits composting facilities is to make sure that the benefits, the climate benefits are more than the greenhouse gases that are being emitted. So it's got to be done correctly um, to get the maximum benefits. I mean, it's really the short answer.
Great, thank you. Another question comes in from Brittany. What are some ways that we can reintroduce Indigenous land steward practices back into current land management strategy? Alice, do you want to take that one?
Yeah, I would love to take that one. What a great question. Yeah, so I mean, okay, the short answer is support tribes, in their efforts. There are tribes all over the state that are doing amazing work with like very few resources. Green Foothills, we work with the Amamutsun tribal band, whose territory extends from the southern part of Santa Clara County into San Benito County and Santa Cruz, and I think part of Monterey County, goes all the way over to the coast. And they're doing amazing stuff. They have a tribal stewardship corps that they go out and they are restoring some of the historical ecology to the land, reintroducing some of the plants that are culturally important for the historical tribal practices. Fiber plants for creating baskets and so on, as well as food plants. They're also doing controlled burns, bringing back fire to the landscape. And they have the Youth Stewardship Corps, which is an amazing, fabulous program that's like creates career training for the tribal youth, as well as just doing good work, for the land in general. So yeah, there's other tribes that are doing work. They're the ones that I know the most about. So I will again do a big pitch for them. It's you can go to if you Google Ama Mutsun Land Trust. And is there a way I can put a link in the chat? I don't see a chat.
There's not a chat, but if you answer
Yeah.
a question, you can respond to the
Okay.
question and answer it with one of
Okay.
the questions.
I will answer the question then in the Q&A function. I'll put the link in there for the Ama Mutsun Land Trust. But really, um, I shouldn't be like only donate to these people. I actually would really encourage everyone, if you don't know the tribal ancestral territory that you live in, you should know that, and you can look that up, and you can support the tribe in your own area, because their tribes are doing great work and need to be encouraged and need to be funded. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. That's great. Another question is about the financial implications of managing open spaces in a changing climate. Maybe Alice, that's also a good one for you, although Andy, you're welcome to
No,
Yeah,
chime in
go
too.
for it.
okay, I'm good. Yeah, that is also a really good question. Yeah, investing in open space protection and stewardship is honestly one of the smartest investments we can make, not just for its climate benefits, not just for its benefits to nature and biodiversity, but just to protect communities. I think people don't realize how much benefit open space provides. We call it ecosystem services. It's like, people talk about green infrastructure and gray infrastructure. So like green infrastructure is where soil just naturally absorbs flood water. It just does this all by itself for free. If you pave it over, now you've got a flood problem. right? And now you have to have what's called gray infrastructure, stuff made from concrete or steel, to control those flood risks. Now you have to have, you have to have storm drains, you have to have, all of this infrastructure to just prevent people's lands from flooding, people's homes and businesses from flooding. Whereas, if we had our natural lands and we have the creeks and the rivers and so on, there we go. Like, that's handling the flooding there. Same thing. I could go on and on. Vegetation filters pollution from both the water and the air. Think about when air pollution increases, what our public health costs become, just like trying to address the problems of, kids having higher rates of asthma and so on. Wildfires, if we have, natural lands that can be buffers against wildfire, then, there are costs for defending homes against wildfire goes down. So yes, so the financial implications of protecting open space is if we invest a little bit, the benefits we reap are enormous. So yes, so the financial implications are important to be aware of.
Yeah, thank you for that thorough answer. Wonderful. And then we have time for just a couple of more. I know we got a little bit of a late start, so I just want to, unless Andy has a question you want to ask more than this one, I think this one's really important. What role do open spaces play in climate justice, and what actions individuals take to support climate justice? Could you make that connection, Andy, for us?
Yeah, absolutely. So when we launched the LA Biodiversity Index back in 2015 now, one of the essential tenets was access to nature. We wanted to make sure that the communities that really needed nature the most, which are often the communities that are built, and I'm talking about LA right now, um, which are often the communities that are in the center of the city that have the least amount of nature around. Um, we wanted to make sure that all those folks had access to nature as well. And I think during COVID, especially, we were all cooped up in our houses. Uh, Anytime you could get out of nature, you really understood the benefit and the health benefits of going out of nature and going for a hike. And it can calm your system. It can help your overall outlook, emotional outlook. It's really important. So while we're doing all this work, we need to make sure that we're not just protecting the homes in the hills that cost 5 million bucks, but we're protecting the areas where people can go recreate and go hike and go mountain bike. And um and it's I think one of the most important parts of nature and all the work that we're doing is we give back to nature and then nature gives back to us. It it's one of the things I mentioned a couple of times in my presentation that humans on the natural don't give back to nature. And if we can start to change that dynamic, nature has given us so much and continues to um, healthy ecosystems create the oxygen that we breathe, you know. So so the more that we can keep them healthy, the more they'll keep us healthy. And that goes for environmental justice communities and getting people out of polluted communities to really breathe clean air is really important as well.
Great. I'm going to take the next question, and then I'm going to see if Andy and Alice would each like to make some final concluding remarks you want people to take away with them. But I'm going to answer Julie's question, which is your group endorsing any candidate for governor? I know it's unrelated to exactly this topic, but it is in a way very related because the governor has the veto power, right? And also can really shape a lot of what happens in the state. So um, we are going to be endorsing very soon for governor, and we have a poll for all of our members to weigh in on who they think are the strongest candidates for governor. So if you get on our mailing list, you'll be able to vote who you think is the strongest climate candidate. We have reached out to all of the major candidates and they fill out questionnaires. And so we're being careful with that, but we're going to come out with our announcement soon about who we will endorse. So stay tuned for that. It should be good. And then I'm sorry we can't get to all the rest of the questions. There was a great participation on the Q&A, and I thank you for all your great questions. You can get on our mailing list by going to www.climateactionca.org. And if you just want the mailing list, you can fill out the contact us form. That will get you on it. If you'd like to volunteer, there's a volunteer page and there's a donate page. So again, that's www.climateactionca.org. And now for the final concluding remarks. Alice, would you like to go first?
Yeah, you know what? I just want to say, because I think when we talk about climate change, we talk about like all some of the scary stuff that's going on. It's just easy to lose heart. It's easy to get very depressed, and I want people to feel hopeful. I want them to feel encouraged, because you know we can do a lot to right the ship. There's things all of us can do individually. We all can participate in governmental processes. As Linda was saying, volunteer with Climate Action California. It's an amazing way to get involved. And you might be surprised at how much better you feel about just the state of the world and everything in general if you just like pitch in and you feel like you're actually making a difference, whether it's locally, whether it's on the state or the national or international, whatever level. Just like doing something about it helps a lot. So step away from the social media, put down the phone, get together with other folks who are doing important work, and you'll be amazed at how much more positive you'll feel.
I appreciate that. And I've seen that with my own eyes. It's so true.
Yeah.
Thank you so much, Alice. Very inspiring. And Andy, do you want to give a final comment?
Yeah, that's almost the best advice ever. If you're paying attention to the news and to the world's most ridiculous and dangerous reality show that we've all been pummeled by, um, it can seem like there's no climate crisis anymore. It can seem like nothing's really going on. You get into an echo chamber and it's like, oh, there's no more climate problem because nobody's talking about it. But if you do a search, which I do actually pretty regularly, for extreme weather events or anything related to climate, it's still going on. It's getting worse. When we first started talking about climate, my LA City Council member boss back in like 2012, we would look back for a climate disaster and be like 2 months ago, 3 months ago, and then it was every month, and then it was every week, and then it was yesterday, and then it was today. And the today is continuing. Every day there's a climate disaster somewhere in the world. There's an extreme a storm, there's a flood, there's a drought. And so it's easy to get overwhelmed by all of this. But like Alice was talking about, if you get involved with a group like Climate Action California, like Green Foothills, like People, Food, and Land, you start to understand that people are doing the work, and you've got a community who can put its arms around you emotionally at the least, that good people are doing good work. And as things are getting overturned and getting harder, um, it just gives you the emotional support you need to get through the day. But it also helps improve, uh they're talking about getting to Mars. Let's save this planet. This is the planet that's actually got habitability and oxygen and water, and we don't really know of any other place that we can actually live. So let's take care of this one instead of spending tons of money trying to get somewhere else.
Thank you, Andy. Such a good point. So true. Well, we've come to the end of our time, and I want to just finish by thanking so much, first of all, Jocelyn Rodriguez, who's been advancing the slides and helping behind the scenes. Thank you so much, Jocelyn. It's been a huge help. And Jocelyn's on the Green Foothills staff. So thank you, Green Foothills team. And to you, Alice and Andy, for the time you put into preparing, to rehearsing, to polishing, and to presenting. I learned a lot. I'm sure our audience did. So thank you both so much. And then to everybody who showed up today live to watch and learn, everybody who's going to be watching the recording, your interest matters a lot. Your questions matter, your participation. So just thank you so much for caring and for taking action in your own ways. Whatever we can all do together, it makes a difference. So With that, enjoy the rest of SF Climate Week, and we will sign off.